Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at Storm, but I'll also be doing an overview of the X-Men 97 update, covering the performance of Cyclops, Beast, and Sunspot in PvE as well. Since there aren't really any PvP upgrades this update, this video is going to be somewhat short, just covering how the characters perform in PvE, going into some of their potential rotations, build options that you can use for them, and just kind of show you in general how much better they have become and kind of the upper tier content that they can perform. Undoubtedly, Storm is the star of this update. She got an absolutely massive improvement in PvE and is now basically in the higher echelon of PvE performance. Characters like Doctor Strange and Luna Snow in AB content. I'm sure that a lot of people are already aware just how powerful and amazing Storm is, especially in ABX and ABL content, since I believe she got around 150 hits in her rotation now, so a lot of the people easily just tested her there and just saw the improvement. She easily took over the days that she qualified for in terms of the restrictions. But one of the other things that Storm is also very good at and has a lot of value in for people, or at least they'll find out soon enough, is that she is a monster in World Boss Legend content as well. She is part of the X-Force team-up collection, meaning that you can potentially get up to 10% additional Pierce for the character, which is huge for World Boss Legend. And luckily for me, I was able to max that out, so I have around 35% Pierce for the character. And once you get into the higher stages of World Boss Legend, a lot of the restrictions are for things like Mutant, Female, or Blast, or any kind of combination of those. So she becomes basically the prime candidate for that content because she is the best performing at it. Just for reference, I do have Storm completely maxed out. I have Odin's in every slot. I have a 6-star level 20 artifact. And I have a brilliant CTP of Rage on her. If you are planning on using her for PvE, which I would highly recommend, then a CTP of Rage, Mighty CTP of Rage Brilliant, is kind of the way to go because you're likely going to be using her for ABX and ABL as well, and that is the best performing CTP for that content, but also for the higher stages of World Boss Legend 2. You can already see just how dominant she is. I was able to complete stage 73 of Dark Phoenix in under 2 minutes. The rotation that I used for her is to do a 1 and 2 cancel into a 3, then you delay cancel that after she kind of rises up a little bit and the camera shifts slightly, then you go into the 5th skill, cancel that, and finish off with the 4th skill. When you have your ultimate skill, you do the exact same rotation, but you cancel the 4th skill into the ultimate skill, so it would basically be a 3, delay cancel 5, cancel 4, and then go into the 6th skill. When you have your tier 4, you basically want to use that before you go into your rotation so that you can fill it up again and spam it right after. The striker that I use for Storm is Thor because he matches the instinct type, and because I have a brilliant CTP of Rage on Thor as well, but another good striker is Gambit too. So you saw in that last clip that I was able to do stage 34 of Black Dwarf and Ebony Maw and finish that stage with about 1 minute and 50 seconds remaining, or roughly in about 3 minutes. Keep in mind that I was only using 1 support for that. If I had access to 2, she would have been able to clear that a lot faster. Only was using Mystique and obviously Storm's own support because she deals elemental damage. I was using Invisible Woman as the leadership, but she only gives energy attack, not any kind of damage increase, so that isn't as substantial. The restriction for that previous stage was Female, and I believe for this one, Proxima and Corvus, it is Blast. Even though I have access to 2 supports this time and a better leadership support combo, Cyclops being one of them, so if you are pushing to higher stages of World Boss Legends, Cyclops is an amazing support, and also for ABX and ABL content, as you'll see soon enough. But despite having those 2 supports, I am also facing off versus Corvus, who is a speed type, so I do have a type disadvantage. But regardless of that, I was still able to clear stage 39 and did so with about 2 minutes remaining, or within about 3 minutes. And for the final World Boss Legend showcase for Storm, it's pretty much the toughest World Boss Legend stage that I have unlocked. It's stage 43 of Black Swan. And again, I have a type disadvantage, but do have access to 2 supports. Regardless of that, I was still able to clear the stage and ended up finishing it with roughly around 2 minutes remaining, which again showcases just how insanely powerful Storm is, especially if you have the maxed out team up collection. Just for reference, I don't really have the video or screenshots of it, but I was trying to push this stage before the new uniform dropped with the old one, and she just wasn't fast enough. I believe I ran out of time and wasn't able to complete it, so I would easily say that this new uniform provides at least anywhere from 1:15 to 1:30 improvement, if not more, probably closer to 2 minutes. So you can easily see that Storm provides a ton of value for World Boss Legend, especially pushing to those higher World Boss Legend stages and those higher World Boss Legend bosses, the World Boss Legend Plus ones. That's something you might want to consider now with the new material dropping that allows you to upgrade the tier 4 5th gear for characters. I don't have enough of a sample size yet, but from what I've seen online and from my own personal experience, it seems that you do get more of that new material in the World Boss Legend Plus bosses. Unsurprisingly, Storm is now meta for ABX and ABL as the damage dealer, not just the support as she was before, not only because of the crazy hit count that she got and improvement from the previous uniform, but also because the character pretty much has all of the cancel effects for all of the seasons, with the exception of Burn. Storm overtakes Psylocke in the female mutant restriction, and also Gambit and Psylocke in the hero mutant restriction. And she can also be used in the no restrictions day if you don't have characters like Luna and Doctor Strange built up, but even if you do have them built up, she actually does pretty well compared to them. The main difference that I've seen from the high-end ABX, ABL players is that Doctor Strange has access to guaranteed crit, whereas Storm doesn't, so she does become a little bit more RNG, whereas Doctor Strange is more consistent in the high-end scores that he can get. Using Fury's leadership and Dazzler support on the no restriction day for ABX, I was able to get around 17.5 million. And for those wondering how she would perform if she did have some guaranteed crit, I ended up swapping in Phil Coulson instead of Dazzler, which does provide guaranteed crit to the character, and I was able to score pretty much the exact same, so at least in ABX it doesn't seem to provide too major of a difference. It pretty much is essentially the same as the kind of higher damage that Dazzler provides versus the lower damage and guaranteed crit that Phil Coulson provides. Just for reference, in the ABL mutant female restriction, I was able to get 13.6 or 13.7 with Storm on my very first try, whereas with Psylocke, I was usually getting somewhere around the low 13 millions with her. For the mutant hero restriction, I was able to score around 1 million more by using Cyclops instead of Polaris, who also has a mighty liberation, so that contributed to the much higher score. And for comparison, the other character that I used was Gambit with a similar build to Storm, and I was only able to score somewhere around the 13.8 or 14 million with him, so Storm is an improvement over him as well. I also tested her on the no restriction day for ABL, so using Nick Fury leadership, and I did actually end up using Phil Coulson support instead of Dazzler because I found that the guaranteed crit was more impactful in ABL versus ABX. But with this setup, I was able to score somewhere around 15 million, so about 300,000 more than I did with the Hero Mutant setup. But I do end up scoring more with Doctor Strange and the supports that I use with him, because he just ends up being more consistent, I guess, with guaranteed crit and just ends up performing better overall. I'm not sure how that compares to those big ABX, ABL players, how she stacks up versus the very top ABL meta characters, but it seems that she isn't really too far off from them, and I guess it really comes down to refining her playstyle. Besides Storm, Cyclops also got a pretty big glow up. He definitely has respect to his name now. He isn't meta in any content, I believe, but despite that, he is very good. He has a really great tier 4 that no one really knew about because no one really tier 4'd him outside of his support capabilities, and even now he's mostly just going to be used for support, but for a lot of fans who want to use him in PvE content, he definitely is a character that can be built for PvE, and one of the builds that I would recommend for him, like many other characters now, is a CTP of Rage, though I think that you can potentially make something like CTP of Energy or CTP of Destruction work. Despite that, I would still recommend a CTP of Rage because it just makes it makes him easier to play, and because you can potentially even use him in things like ABX, but not really so much ABL because Storm just eclipses him. In terms of the build that I'm using for Cyclops, I don't have nearly anything as decked out as I do for Storm. I'm using just regular Urus. I have a 5-star artifact, and I don't even have a CTP for PvE. I'm using a Mighty Liberation because he is a meta support for AV content. That is one thing he is meta for. But even with all of that, I'm still able to clear a stage 40 of Kang without having a damage proc. I actually end up completing this fight with around 10 seconds remaining, or a little over that, but the fact that he can complete the stage without a damage proc CTP is just absolutely crazy and showcases just how much of an improvement he got from his previous uniform. I obviously don't show what he did with the previous uniform because it was just so horrible that it's not even worth comparing. If you want to play Psylocke, you need this uniform. In terms of the rotation for him, you can do a 1-2 slight delay cancel if you want the hits from it, or you can do an instant cancel to fill up the meter faster, but his main skill rotation will be 3 delay cancel after he starts the skill and the animation starts, and then you do a 5 cancel 4. When you have access to your ultimate skill, you cancel the 4th skill into the 6th skill, and then once you have your tier 4, you basically just use that before going into rotation, because it does also provide you with that additional pierce, which is very nice for PvE. On the blast mail restriction, Doctor Strange will still be the meta there, but I believe that Cyclops can now be used as a support for him, if I'm not mistaken, with Phil Coulson, or maybe there are some other options that are still better. I'm not sure. The ABX, ABL masters will know that for sure. But if you're just wondering how Cyclops does on there with a mighty CTP of Rage this time, I was able to score somewhere around 14.6, 14.7 million. But keep in mind that I only had one support. If I actually had access to another support for it, then he easily could have scored past 15 million, which just showcases how much better he is from before, and that the character is actually quite good for ABX content, even if he isn't necessarily meta. It's worth noting that he does have all of the cancel effects for the different seasons, so if the restrictions do end up changing towards his favor, then he might end up being a top qualifier for one of those particular restrictions for his own day. I didn't have as much success with Cyclops in ABL as I did in ABX. I'm not sure what the reason for his lesser performance here is. I know that the hit count does have a major weight or value in ABX, which might not as much in ABL. Might also be in combination with the hit count and the damage done, so that might be it. Might also be that I didn't really perform his rotation as well as I could have. Regardless, if you're wondering how he does in ABL, I was able to score somewhere around 10.3 million, again with a mighty CTP of Rage. Beast is one of the characters that didn't really gain anything this update. Despite the fact that he got a uniform and tier 4, his improvement in PvE is passable, it's okay at best, and his performance in PvP is basically non-existent. He is just the support as he was before, and the character could have really used some penetration or iframe ignore to actually push him as a standalone PvP character, and even as a standalone and combo support character because of the HP that he provides. It's very unfortunate they didn't do this because he has a ton of HP, not only from his base kit, his support, but also from his artifact. So if they added an iframe ignore, if they added penetration, or if they even made his damage scale off of HP, that would have been huge for the character, but he didn't get any of that. The tests that I did with him are without a damage proc. If you want to build him for PvE, you can use a single skill damage proc like an energy or destruction, or even a CTP of Rage, but I wouldn't recommend doing so because, again, he just isn't really that great for it. Just for comparison, I tried out his old uniform on a stage 24 of Null without using a leadership or support, and then tried this new uniform now, and the performance was basically identical. His PvE performance, at the very least, didn't change at all with the new uniform. The rotation that I used for him is to do a 3 delay cancel after he throws those explosives in the air, then you do a 4 cancel 5. Once you have your waking skill, you can use that at the beginning or right after you do your 3 delay cancel, and then the rotation is still the same. You do 4 cancel 5. With the level 80 upgrade, no surprise, he's able to clear this stage about a minute faster. And I guess it's worth noting that the character isn't absolutely awful because he can clear stage 54 without the need of a leadership or support, and did so with around 40 seconds remaining, but I believe that other mutant characters at level 80 can do the same with pretty much the same setup and no damage proc with a little over a minute remaining. Probably even a minute and 30 seconds remaining. If you're wondering how much of a difference supports make, I was able to clear the exact same stage, this time using Cyclops' leadership and Dazzler's support. Cyclops has Mighty Liberation, Dazzler has a Mighty Insight, both for PvE, and this allowed me to basically take off about 2 minutes from the clear time, so it does make a pretty massive difference. Another thing that is worth mentioning is that although the character isn't really anything special now, he did gain a pretty amazing tier 4 skill, providing him with a damage increase as well as damage reduction. So it's possible that in the future, if he gets a good enough uniform that actually gives him some meta stats either for PvE or for PvP, that he could end up being pretty damn good. He is essentially in the same position that Cyclops was when he got his tier 4 upgrade but didn't get really a new uniform. In this case, Beast got a new uniform, but it just was basically nothing. It was just a support increase of 5% HP. So if you see it in that perspective, if he gets his next uniform and they decide to really dial it to 11, then he can potentially be a very strong tier 4 character, but for now he's really not worth it. And then Sunspot is the free character. He isn't really going to be used for anything besides his support because he provides that flame damage. So in terms of the build options for the character, you're likely going to be using something like CTP of Insight or CTP of Liberation. But if you do want to play around with him, then you can also utilize something like a CTP of Judgment or potentially a CTP of Rage, though he obviously won't really provide much value in that regard. If you're wondering what his rotation is, you do a cancel of the first and second skill, then you do a 3 delay cancel after he kind of hits the ground, and then you cancel into the 5th skill and cancel into the 4th skill. When you have your ultimate, you basically do the exact same rotation, but cancel the 4th skill into the 6th or ultimate skill. That pretty much does it for the character upgrades this update. I'm not entirely sure what the perception of the update is so far. It seems to be good for the most part, but it could also be a little bit mixed or not so great for the people who wanted more from Beast, for example, or for those people who wanted Cyclops to actually be pushed into the meta as a standalone character, possibly for PvP, but also more so for PvE, since he obviously got a great improvement, but just isn't really meta. Despite that, I think the fact that Storm got such an amazing improvement and got pushed out of the seasonal hell, so now everyone has access to her, and she is amazing for a ton of PvE content, World Boss Legend, ABX, ABL, and so on, and Cyclops actually being an amazing support and being able to be strong standalone for people who want to play him is a major win, especially since we got 2 good upgrades in this update, and most of the upgrades that we got in previous updates have just been middling or just not worth mentioning at all. So they haven't moved the needle at all. This update did, so I think that's worth mentioning and worth praising the devs. Hopefully we get more updates that actually provide meaningful improvements and characters are pushed towards meaningful upgrades that actually make them useful and not just provide an upgrade for the sake of providing an upgrade. Take Bishop, for example. He has a counter skill and has a ton of energy damage reduction, so it would be really cool if they kind of took that and pushed him more towards PvP, where he can just become an energy tank powerhouse and just be able to hard counter energy dealing characters, or at the very least provide some kind of support to your team in terms of the energy damage dealing that the opponents do in PvP, since he's part of that support awakening skill with Beast and Angel. It would kind of make sense. Personally, I would want to see him also provide reflect damage, so that is kind of a rare PvP effect that kind of makes the character a lot more valuable, because I don't really see them pushing Bishop towards PvE, considering Storm just took over the mutant restrictions. Aside from Bishop, I'm hoping that Madeline and Sinister also get upgrades in the mid-month, or potentially another mid-month, since they are hinted at as the recommended characters in Timeline Survival. Madeline gets a uniform, it would be massive. She's already pretty good in PvP, and that would really push her to the top of the meta, considering that the first uniform provides a lot, especially for a native tier 2 character who has immortality. And similarly for Mr. Sinister, he would become an amazing PvP meta because he already has immortality effect, a ton of PvP effects like guard break immunity natively and other things like that. So if he got a tier 4 and a uniform and an iframe ignore, for the love of God, devs, give him an iframe ignore, then he can become a timeline or team battle arena meta character or otherworld battle meta character. That pretty much covers everything for the update, with the exception of the 5th gear stuff. I didn't really mention or talk about that too much, but basically just do World Boss Legend Plus to gain access to that material or the most of it, and don't bother rushing any of the characters. The upgrades that it provides are good, but not really impactful enough to be game-changing and to set you back or anything. It's just a nice to have. And if you were to focus on any characters, I would probably say focus on the 2 top PvP characters, Sentry and Null first, and probably 1 top PvE character after that, like Doctor Strange or Storm, for example. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, found it entertaining or useful, please consider liking, subscribing, and potentially sharing it with others. As I've mentioned before, it can help them out in terms of builds and figuring out what to do with characters, but it also helps my channel grow so I can make more videos like this. As always, I appreciate people taking the time to watch my videos, so thank you, but the video is now over.